What you're about to see is a forensic roadmap. It's a tool, really, designed for one thing: clarity. We're going to lay out the documented facts of a very complex and manipulative family history, especially for those who are intentionally kept in the dark. We're going to unpack how the legal system was deliberately weaponized using a specific playbook to rewrite history and frame an innocent man.
You know, to really get your head around how this whole frame-up was even possible, we can't start at the beginning. It's a little backwards, I know, but we have to start at the end, with a stunning and really clear conclusion from a senior federal judge who saw right through all the lies.
And that right there? That's the court's official finding. A judge looked at all the evidence, looked the father, Ken Jones, right in the eye, and determined that he committed a despicable act to imprison his own son, Scott. The court made it clear this wasn't some tragic mistake. It was intentional.
So that just begs the question, right? How on earth does a father manage to frame his own son so effectively? Well, the documents show it wasn't random at all. It was a calculated psychological strategy.
And that strategy, it actually has a name. It's a recognized pattern of psychological abuse, one that perpetrators use to dodge any and all accountability.
It's called DARVO. And once you understand this acronym, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender, it's like a key. Suddenly, every single action Ken Jones took makes perfect, horrifying sense. This is the lens that brings the entire case into focus.
So here's the playbook, step by step. First, Ken denied his own documented history of abuse. That's step one. Second, he launched a vicious attack on Scott's character to make him look unreliable. And third, the final, devastating move, he completely reversed the roles, painting the actual whistleblower, Scott, as the predator and himself as the poor, victimized father.
Okay, so now that we know the playbook, let's rewind. Let's go all the way back and see how this manipulation was built, piece by painful piece, starting with the one event that really kicked this whole thing off.
Now, look closely at this timeline, because the first entry is everything. June 2002. That is a full 6 months before Scott was ever indicted for any crime. And who called the police? He did. Scott was the one who went to the police, filing a detailed report accusing his father of abuse. So let's be clear, Scott wasn't the offender, he was the whistleblower.
This is where things get really sinister. This is where the legal trap was set. After Scott ran away from home, Ken reported him for felony burglary, for taking his own clothes. But see, it was never about the property, it was about leverage. That arrest put Scott on a court-ordered release with a restraining order, basically giving his father a remote control to send him back to jail anytime he wanted.
So you can imagine, with that legal sword just dangling over his head, Scott was desperate. He's in a mediation meeting trying to make this whole fake burglary thing just go away. He hands over keys to a storage shed to settle it, and he says this. He was talking about the property dispute.
But Ken took that statement and twisted it into a confession of something else entirely. And you don't have to take my word for it. Years later, in his own sworn affidavit, he admitted it all. He confessed that Scott never used the word penetrate, but that he, Ken, just decided to tell the jury that's what he meant. I mean, think about that. The father admitted, under oath, to lying.
Now, while all of this was happening, while Scott was being prosecuted, Ken didn't stick around. He took the family and ran. This number, 12, that's how many times the family moved in just 2 years.
12 moves across 4 states. This wasn't a family looking for a new start. The documents show this was a calculated flight to evade a protective custody order and, crucially, to isolate Scott's younger sister, Stephanie. She was kept out of school, cut off from any support systems, all to make sure that Ken's narrative was the only one she would ever hear.
But, you know, a frame-up built on a foundation of lies, well, it can't last forever. And eventually the whole thing came crashing down under the weight of its own deceit.
The first major crack in that foundation came from the father's own words. This right here is his signed, sworn affidavit from 2012. It's the document where he explicitly recants his trial testimony and admits that he lied to the court. Next up, the person at the center of the allegation, Stephanie. As an adult, finally free from her father's control, she gave an exhaustive recantation. She explained that because of her sheltered upbringing, she didn't even understand her own anatomy or the legal terms she was coached to use. She stated it as clearly as possible. Penetration never occurred. And then came this bombshell from the mother, Joy Jones. In a 2022 letter, she confesses everything. Not just that the testimony was perjured, but that the physical evidence, a CD-ROM of images, was a complete fabrication. They created it themselves, from thin air, just to make sure their son was convicted.
So with all these confessions now on the table, the entire narrative just completely flips. The roles that Ken Jones worked so hard to reverse are finally put back in their rightful place.
And here it is, the core truth of this entire case. The motive was never about protecting the family. It was about retaliation. This whole thing was designed to silence the one person, Scott, who had the courage to report his father's abuse to the police.
And what were Ken's so-called justifications for this? I mean, what did Scott do that was so terrible? In his own affidavit, he lists these things. Not crimes, not even close. It's the behavior of a typical, maybe rebellious teenager. He basically admitted, in his own words, that he sent his son to prison for being a kid he couldn't control.
After the truth finally came out, Stephanie herself wrote this powerful plea to the state, affirming her brother's innocence. She writes, "Scott is innocent. He never penetrated me," literally begging for an end to the nightmare her family created.
So after looking at all the documents, the affidavits, the court findings, the conclusion is just unavoidable. Scott Jones was never the predator. He was the whistleblower who tried to save his family, and this roadmap is the evidence.
And that leaves us with one final haunting question. The family has confessed, a federal judge has condemned the father's despicable act, the paper trail is undeniable. But after all these years, after a life has been lost, when the truth is this clear, is the truth enough to finally achieve justice?